we have a reaction, and by reaction I mean there's some explosion or there's some incident, or you say something you regret. First of all, it's important to think that that didn't just come out of the blue. It's not suddenly you're reacting. What's really happening is it's building up over time. So you're on your way to the office and you're a little bit late and your kid's complaining about blah, 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 and then you get in the car and you run and your wife left the car out of gas, and then, not that that ever happens, and then you get, you're on the way to the office and then somebody cuts you off and then you come in the door and blah, 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 and then, and then you're sitting at your desk and somebody says something and you go, yeah, and that's the reaction. Each one of those little steps along the way is a little kind of mini reaction. And each one of them follows a cycle, and there are 3 steps in that cycle. The first step is you're getting set up. Your physiology is starting to change. You're thinking about the problems. You're thinking about what a mess this is. Your emotions are starting to get involved, and you're starting to feel agitated or impatient or worried. And then there's some trigger. The guy cuts you off. And you interpret that trigger as the next phase. And then you go through this escalation process. And in that moment, the interpretation actually lasts a quarter of a second. You sense something, quarter of a second, you start to process that. These chemicals start to be produced. In the next quarter of a second, they begin to be released, and now the reaction begins. And now these chemicals are flooding through your brain and your body. They're sending these signals saying, there's a problem. Watch out. Whatever. Fight. Run away. There's something going on. And then these chemicals are, if you're going to stay in the reaction cycle, they're going to trigger you to keep kind of going. And you start saying, okay, now I'm really agitated. And now that agitation is the setup for your next time around. Now there's a new trigger. Somebody comes into your office and asks you a question. That new trigger, you interpret it. You're interpreting it in the light of this context that you're in. If, it was just sort of a beautiful, peaceful morning, that same question might not push your buttons. But because you've set yourself up, or you've been set up, when you have that trigger, you go around the reaction cycle again. So as you notice your own reaction, and you notice, where am I in this process? Am I in this setup phase? Am I kind of putting myself in a position or being put in a position to be more reactive? How am I interpreting these signals? And then finally, am I escalating and going around the cycle again? What's important to realize is you don't have to keep going around. And there are choice points. You can choose to get out of the cycle at any one of these 3 phases. So when you're going through a reaction, it's not just a sudden thing. It's a sequence of events, and it's a series of spirals. It's a kind of vicious cycle. And as you go around and around in this cycle, you get more and more and more reactive.